Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly podcast where each episode we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and how we might fit it into our role-playing campaigns. Fiona is doing some interpretive dance.
I was trying to do a dragon and I did it on the dungeon instead and it didn't make any sense whatsoever.
I was like, flumps?
Yeah, flumps. I was doing like a flump impression for that, the entire of it.
Yeah. Talking of flumps.
Yes.
Flumps live in the Underdark in caves.
Look at that segue straight in.
And what are we talking about today, Fiona?
Well, today it's very special. We're actually, for the first time ever, I think, on DM's Book, we're actually looking at an actual D&D fictional book. Yes, absolutely. So we have decided that we're going to try. We don't know how long it will go for. It could be just something that we do for a couple of books, and then we'll be like, no, thanks.
Well, I've read 7 of them, so
you've read 7 of them. I've now listened to 1 of them, but we are going to look at the Legend of Drizzt novels, starting right at the beginning with Homeland.
Yes, which is technically the 4th book to have been released like chronologically, but actually in terms of it's actually a prequel to the series that we're going through, just to clarify for people.
Yeah, so this is like part of the Dark Elf trilogy, essentially, which is a pre-sequel to the Icewind Dale trilogy. It's focusing on Drizzt Do'Urden, who is the drow sort of ranger character who becomes incredibly famous. Like, if you've done any sort of D&D stuff, you probably have seen an image of him with his 2 swords, and Guinevere, his cool-ass panther, which we'll get onto in a second.
He's all about the Icewind Dale game. There's the Icewind Dale game, isn't there? And he's also in the Icewind Dale, what's its name? The book, whatever it's called. He turns
the adventure.
Up. Yeah, briefly.
Rime of the Frostmaiden.
Rime of the Frostmaiden. And then also in the game Dark Alliance. Him and his party are the ones that are made famous in the first 4, 5, and 6 sequel. Trilogy. Prequel, which is Wolfgar, Catti Bree, and there's a halfling, a Regis. I want to say Regis.
Well, what I'll say quickly, because clearly neither you or I are that much of experts on these novels. Well, certainly from my point of view, I'm coming at this completely blind, having never read any of these novels. And it's one of the reasons we sort of wanted to do this series, because obviously, we are a book club, and we know, obviously, it is the 50th year coming out, and it's cool to go back and look at some past history, as it were. These novels are still going. There are 39 of these novels are out, and that's not including all the like short stories.
Oh yeah, it's millions of anthologies and stuff. Exactly.
So we thought it'd be cool to go back and like look at it, because ultimately Drizzt Do'Urden, is like such a legendary character. Like, people will go to it, like you said, it's he's referenced in quite a few video games and quite a few adventure modules as well. So it makes sense. And I'll say as well, like, I don't really know too much about the drow society as well. All I ever hear is the stereotypical, they're evil and women are in charge, and it's one of those things where I've read a lot of D&D lore, and I've actually read a lot about the elves for an episode we didn't get round to doing in the end. And it's interesting now to be like, okay, well, what does the fiction, how does that reflect in the fiction, and how impactful that is and how influential? Because this particular book came out about 34 years ago.
Yeah.
About 1990, which is wild.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to say this right at the beginning, and I'll probably say this for all these books. Your mileage may vary. There's obviously going to be spoilers. There's definitely content in here where I went, maybe not.
Yeah.
But again, it is of its time.
There's quite a bit of that.
You've read 7 of these novels so far in the Drizzt. What sort of spurred you on to read the Legend of Drizzt novels?
Humble Bundle.
Really?
I got a load of them in the Humble Bundle, and I thought I really would like to read them. They are considered the ultimate D&D novels. I had some Forgotten Realms novels when I was younger, like the Elminster ones and stuff like that, which got me in. I can't remember any of those stories. I just remember they were wizards and it was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought I should really read these.
Yeah.
To be honest, I enjoyed this trilogy much more. So I read them in the order we're going to go through them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you get to 4, 5, 6, and it really does take a this is clearly someone's first book.
Yeah. It's a bit of a left turn, yeah.
And also, it's basically The Hobbit.
This book, the Homeland book.
No. Oh. The 4, 5, and 6 is basically the story of The Hobbit.
Oh, I understand.
Where Battlehammer wants to go back to his dwarven kingdom and take back the treasures of his mine from a dragon that came in and slaughtered everyone. So it is literally the story of The Hobbit.
I
Just with
see.
D&D characters, like literally it's a trilogy of stories, but it sprinkles it with Castle Keep and Silvery
Mm.
Moon and all these really fantastical D&D things. There's a really good bit where he talks with another dragon.
Hmm.
It is a good story, but it's
Yeah.
clearly like the first couple, you're like, wow, this is just
Interesting.
plagiarism. But
For me, like, because I have read like the tiniest bit of the first Dragonlance book, because when we were
oh
talking
yeah,
about doing Dragonlance, I was like, oh, maybe I'll read those ones. And I found them pretty impenetrable, to be honest with
oh
you. And that was
yeah.
through reading them. And also, I appreciate, obviously, you and I don't have too much
Mm,
experience really with the world of Kryn, other than like maybe looking at the Dragonlance adventure and stuff
yeah.
like that. So I didn't feel as much of a connection to it. Whereas compared to this, which is definitely set in Faerun, and like you said, you got the Candlekeep stuff. Here we've got the Underdark and Menzoberranzan. Even though I don't know it, I'm like, oh, I can make that connection because I already
Well,
have a.
House Ban Ray. You will now know of House Ban Ray because they turn
Yeah,
up in this, don't they?
exactly. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from this completely fresh.
Mm.
Like we said, there's going to be spoilers, but please forgive us if I'm going to ask certainly very obvious, stupid
No, both of
questions.
us. Yeah.
Now, it's been out for 34 years, and again, questioning stuff about like, oh, why is this the case? And it might be answered later on in another book, or
Yeah.
maybe it's super obvious, I guess is the thing. I want to start off by saying I really did enjoy this book because I didn't know what to expect from it. I've read the sort of synopsis of it beforehand. Like this is basically the sort of beginning of Drizzt and how he was sort of born into the society, and then a sort of a turning point towards the end where he sort of decides he can't be a part of the society anymore and goes off into the Underdark, leaving behind these sort of politics and the sort of tension and also the amount of bloodshed.
Oh yeah.
So I was listening to it on an audiobook. I found it a lot easier to, obviously, pronunciations are much easier when you're being told what they are, etc. But I actually found it much easier to sort of get gripped into what was going on. This is me comparing it to something else, which would have been probably popular at the time as well, but like Game of Thrones. There's all these houses and all these sort of like backstabbing stuff, and like we're going to take over another house. And as long as we are successful in our takeover and killing them and wiping them all out completely, no one's going to say anything.
Yeah.
Which is wild because like they just took there's this aggressive force of just taking out one of the big ruling houses to replace them.
I think the world building and the sort of like lore building of this is really well done. And I think if you read 4, 5, and 6, then came to this, you'd be like, wow, this is a different writer, completely different writer. And this trilogy is great because it really fleshes out an area that I don't think was ever really talked about. I don't know how much was done before. And it is a really interesting construction, and those ideas you just said of they all worship the goddess Lolth, and so which has these connotations of like greed and taking over and sort of like expansion, and so
constantly going for power.
Exactly. And so with that, people are accepting of that, that's the way it is, and these are the rules laid down that are not only just tenets of their culture but also tenets of their religion. If you're not making those moves and you're not constantly plotting, you will, as it does in this book, find out, you become in the unfavor of Lolth, and therefore if you are seen as disfavorable by Lolth, then
you're weak,
you're an easier target as well, because then it's even more acceptable. Like if you were going to go after a house because they've fallen out of favor of Lolth, then go for it,
it's
because
incredible.
which is kind of interesting. So this whole like, you not only do it only for your own need of power, but you must do it, otherwise you will fall out of favor of your god that is real, not just fictitious, but like as in is there and will tell others on you. It's such a tattletale.
It is really, this idea like, oh, I've heard this, there's lots of rumors going on, but then going on from that, so Lolth obviously is huge in the drow society, and you have the people that have the power. Really, we'll go on to the gender sort of split in a second, but like it is the clerics of Lolth and the religious side of it, which comes across very strongly, and it's putting out those tenets constantly to sort of not working class, but it's the fighters. They are so proud of like having these academies where they can just kill and be like incredible fighters, because it's like an us versus them mentality. We have to be stronger, we have to be amazing. But what I found was really interesting, and again, would I go through this if I was introducing drow into a game, is this idea of hating not only everyone else but also other drow, and like this sort of violence towards other people, and it's just this aggression and horror, and it's just like you're constantly paranoid, I think, as a drow. You know, for anything you do, that could be it, and you have to either be, like you said, you have to be the strongest one and just embrace this hatred and this nastiness towards everyone around you, even though there is a hierarchical like order to it all.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you become disassociated. So that's what happens with Drizzt, is that he does not give in because of this training and the way he's brought up. He suddenly is realizing he's on this outside of his bubble, and he's, he goes out on these, later on in the book, he goes out on these patrols where they go and kill surface elves because they're so evil against us, and they've told all this rhetoric about how we're bad, etc. And you're like, these are just innocent people that we're just slaughtering. And I appreciate, obviously, right now in the world, when we're hearing lots of wars going on, and there's sort of rhetoric about like, well, they're clearly the aggressors and this, that, and the other, and you're like, these are just people who are just living their normal lives. And it just came to me so strongly in that moment.
It's a pretty horrific moment, and it's like the journey of Drizzt throughout the book, and that sense of being on the outside. And there's some beautiful moments between him and his father, Zach Nafane.
Yeah, Zach Nafane, yeah.
And that development of that relationship, and him seeing there's someone else potentially who agrees with this, because his father trains him up as a youth and to become this fighter. But it's through that training that Drizzt understands that maybe his father is also, doesn't believe in this strike for power and this need for endless killing, and is also thinking like Drizzt feels inside himself and in his head of like, this is wrong and this is not the way to be. And then the development of that, where he keeps getting put in situations where he's got to make those decisions, and he fails at times, and he brandishes himself for it a lot, but he also makes some decisions that I don't know how much I want to spoil, but that do, that, like with the elves, where he saves the child. He just can't.
A small child.
He just cannot hurt this child. And so makes him pretend to be dead. And which is the thing that sets off the rails of Lolth not like falling out of favor of the house.
Essentially.
In the third act. Yeah. And that also damages his relationship with his father, because his father believes that he killed the child, and because his father was, saw it. Drizzt acts up to it. He has to.
Otherwise he will get killed. And it's rather that I would sacrifice everything to make sure this child is okay. A very bloody thing where he's sort of surprised by a woman, a female elf who's crying, who is killed by someone else in the party, and then this young girl comes out of nowhere because that's her mother. And so he does an incredible sort of like a fading sweep, etc., pulls her down to the ground and smothers her with her mother's blood, which obviously is like, holy shit, this is, like I said, Game of Thrones level stuff. But he's like there, and he has to be like, yes, I killed this child, and isn't it great? And then have a go at the other drow who killed the mother, to be like, how dare you take my kill from me? Performance checks all round, right? Deception checks all round.
Yeah, definitely.
I do want to focus back on the relationship between the weapons master, so Zach Nafane, and Drizzt, because Drizzt does not know that Zach Nafane is his father till right at the end of the book.
He's definitely a father figure, no matter what. As well.
I do think at times, and I know it's just the way it's written and stuff like that, I'm like, Drizzt, come on, mate. Like, clearly.
Did you have to really think that hard about this?
I guess what I'm getting at with this point of view is that I find it very rare in books now to have like an obvious sort of like relationship between two male presenting characters who care about each other, but then they can't necessarily speak about it because of society. So and this is where I go to my period drama and Jane Austen, is that there is definitely a set order. So you hear this inner monologue between sort of like Zach Nafane going, oh God, everything I've done, I should have killed Drizzt. The biggest mistake was not killing him so that he does not turn into the thing
that I hate.
Yeah. Again, it's that sort of thing for me personally. I wouldn't expect that from a male character per se, and certainly in a fantasy setting, it's all like, haha. They have sparring matches where clearly they will have a sparring match, but they're under the context of it is like, one of us will die because the other misunderstood what is going on, and eventually, thank goodness, they sort of like realize that they're coming at it across paths, and they are actually who they say they are, and they're hiding their true selves to make sure they survive in this really cruel society. And I just thought that was such an interesting thing, because I haven't seen that personally. I've not seen that recently in any book. It just struck me as like, wow, that's quite powerful.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's taken away at the end of the book, but like it totally makes sense, because then there's the ultimate sacrifice.
You know what? Period drama is the perfect way to put this. It is like a period drama.
It really is.
And I'm just thinking those fights are just like the dance scenes, where they're just like, where someone's got intentions and the other's got intentions and they don't know what they are. And there's so much going on in these maneuvers, and you can imagine it on the screen. I don't know why this isn't a movie in some respects.
Well, I did wonder that, yeah.
That whole, like, you can just see if you got some really great actors, choreographic actors, who can really move their bodies well, could see those showing off this tension, and doing it, expressing it in a really cool way. You can imagine that would be a director's dream in some respects, to sort of like a fight, but is like a period drama fight, which is filled with all these emotions between father and son. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I totally agree as well, from a point of view of like male characters searching emotions as a general rule in the 90s is possibly maybe when it was starting to happen, but it's like as a story thing in D&D is a real like testament to the writing.
Yeah, I thought so.
I just think from a like looking at D&D as a role-playing game, Yes.
Yeah.
I think in the 90s, particularly just looking at stuff like Planescape that's coming out at this time, as well as building up on Waterdeep and the sort of stories about places and experiencing people's emotions in the game, because particularly Planescape being all about, your beliefs and the emotions that you're going to go through in certain planes and how it's going to affect you in a role-playing guise, and the stuff we read about like Ham It Up in Arborea, and you will feel really sad when you're here, in Pandemonium. It will make you go a little bit loopy, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like there was a shift at this time towards more thought-provoking sort of storytelling and gameplay in this sphere, instead of I'm barbarian, hit you on head, or I'm Ajax the ultimate and I will rule the world. It's more like everyday stories of people trying to exist in a fantasy world, particularly in Dritz's condition, in a world where he is considered secondary citizen to the female characters, which we haven't really talked about too much yet. And trying to make a relationship with his father.
I've not got to the Icewind Dale trilogy where the original starting, right? But I can understand totally why people are like, we want to find out more about this guy rather than the proposed sort of big fighter. They're like, we don't care about who's this random dude who looks sad at the back, is Cat Daddy.
The edgelord,
we want to hear about edgelord Cat Daddy, please.
I mean, D&D players were thirsty back in the 90s as well, but it's also just the fact, like, there is, even in that trilogy, there's a lot to do with the relationships of people, and we will come on to those. And I think like the relationship between Drizzt and Battlehammer as like a second father to him, and the relationship that he has also to Wolfgar and his actual adopted daughter Catty Bree. There's a lot of
there's a lot of other things. A
lot of father figure. Like Battlehammer is like a father figure to a lot of people, but like there's a load of sort of dynamics there, and the relationships between Wolfgar, the sort of love triangle that goes on between Wolfgar, Catty Bree, and Drizzt. Because I didn't know Drizzt gets with Catty Bree, because in my books she's all about Wolfgar, and I'm just like, wait a minute, because you told me this, and I was because
I played a little bit of Dark Alliance, because it's a good, I will say Dark Alliance, it's not the best of video games, but it is a good, like, let's waste a couple of hours or two.
Play with friends. It's a good game to play with friends.
It's a great, and I think I said to you at the time, it always made me laugh, was like Drizzt and Catty Bree were like, count my kills, Catty Bree. That one's on me, Drizzt. And you're like, guys, get a room. And then obviously afterwards I looked up, I was like, oh, they really did. Let's talk about the gender stuff we're sort of talking about. So again, in drow society, it is a matriarchal society. Women rise to the top. They are the ones that are sort of in control of the families. Feels very spider-like. And this idea of like, female spiders, they're top spider in a way, and
shit job being a male spider, that's for sure.
You come, you sort of do your duties as male drow or male spiders, and then you get used and then not eaten, thankfully, but it's worse than that. You are sacrificed, and that idea of like, it's another male heir. Well,
third male heir gets sacrificed, it's a great intro to the story, because it's
brutal.
You get straight into it's. I don't from a critical point of view, but like the whole idea of giving you straight away Drizzt is born, but the moment Drizzt is born, at the same time, his brother is committing...
It's killing the firstborn.
I was looking for the word, not patricide, what's it called?
I know what you mean, like kills his brother to assume the firstborn status. Fraternicide.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
But so like the firstborn, Nilfane, he is like the magic user of the house, etc. And then the secondborn,
Dinin.
Yes, Dinin. What typical
Dickhead Dinin.
Dickhead Dinin, secondborn. as you're right, it starts in media res, right? So we've got the night of this big raid. The House Do'Urden is taking over House Devere, which is like, that's the main sort of conflict in the background of the story. You have the two brothers that are going out, a part of this mission, and there's some really cool, feels very like Lord of the Rings type scenes where people are being thrown off balconies and just absolutely obliterated. And then in the quiet moments, Dylan kills his brother, which just so happens to save Drizzt, because Drizzt is then born on the same night. So it's all drama going on. So you've not only got the drama outside, you've got...
It'd be a great intro. I mean, where is this TV show / movie? Like,
I wondered if there was going to be an animation, because I know they've done little animations in the past and stuff like that. So I wondered if they would do that, because it's very tense, because they go, well, we've born this child. Oh, it's got purple eyes. Weird. And again, I don't know if that's going to be something later on either, but it's unusual. So they're like, maybe... Again, not the word I would use, but, so defected in some way, quick, girl, just get rid of it. And then they're like, stop, Lolth has been sated because we've already killed one of our own. And everyone's like, okay, fine, I guess we can keep this one. And then that's the kind of start. And then you have these three sisters. So first of all, I want to say there are some cracking names in this, and this idea that the matriarch of each family is called Matron something, and it's the fact that Drizzt's mother is Matron Malice. I'm like, I know,
what a great name. It's like a rock and roll name, right?
I want that. Like, I want, we've talked before about those rock and roll sort of like leather like jackets.
Surprise! Fiona likes Matron Malice.
I think she's fucking cool. I
knew you would love Matron Malice, because I was thinking, this is Fiona's like ideal, sort of like badass.
She's cutthroat and brutal, but she's smart. She doesn't let the bloodlust get over her. Whereas all three daughters, I'll be honest, I did mix them up a little bit, because I did feel like some of them, because they had a view of like, we are princesses of Lolth, we don't like our brother, and that's kind of our vibe.
Yeah, they all have a bit of malice in them, in both ways of the word. But like some of them, like Vienna, because she nursed Drizzt, has this slight relationship with him, and that does come through, which is really nice.
They're sort of like looked down, and then obviously they don't trust the males, and again, there's lots of talk about like how they're stupid and they don't do this, and that these characters do accept it. And what I found was interesting is that you had scenes where it's just like Matron Malice and the sisters talking about stuff and politics and stuff, which again, it's very rare you see that necessarily. I'm just thinking of like House of Dragon. It's usually all male people around the board, etc. And then you flip to Zaknafein, Dinan, and Drizzt, and they had their own little conversation later on in the book. And Zaknafein turns to them and goes, look, just because I know we're not, we're lower than the women, means that we can sort our own order here. So it was basically Dinan's trying to like usurp Zaknafein. He goes, you dare question me?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not top because of the way the matriarchal society is, but you dare cross me, you will feel my wrath. And I don't care. And I was like, oh, yeah, Zaknafein. Yeah.
Fucking badass. Yeah, he's fucking badass.
Yeah, fuck Dinan. Fuck him. Yeah, exactly.
He's a dickhead. He is an absolute, he's such a sniveling shit.
Yeah, and I know obviously he'll come back and all that sort of thing.
Let's just say things don't go well for Dinan.
Good.
Yeah, it's not a massive spoiler, because it feels like it's building up for you to hate him enough that he's gonna get his comeuppance. The other thing that I thought was interesting to know, just talking about like the society, but like things that are like particular about it, there are no front doors off the street. Everyone enters the building by going to the balcony, and because everyone in drow society can learn to levitate.
Yes, of course, levitate. Yes, yeah.
So I just love this idea that the streets, I completely missed that. It's just a completely different vibe, because there is no front doors, there's no street frontage. Everything is up high, and so you always look down upon the street, and so that's why the streets are dangerous, because that's where someone could just like knife you at any point. Because if you're caught out in the streets without your bodyguard or protection, someone might chance it. Have a chance at whatever, anyone who's after you. And also you protected always your house, because you can only get to it by climbing up to it or levitating up.
So when they do those big movements of mobilization of the houses towards each other, you could someone could be over to the balcony and looking and seeing all these people just like a big river.
Yeah, people running on roofs, and like people moving in the streets, and you just like spider noises you'd play, wouldn't you, in the background? And these people just coming up there. Oh no. So good. So good.
Then I just want to turn over to, I think, subplot B, I think I call it in my head.
Yeah, let's talk about subplot B.
So again, going back to that first night, so again, we're media res, Drizzt is being born, but also there's this takeover of House Devere, and there's one person that's not at home at the time, and so House Do'Urden employs someone called the Faceless One at this academy, this sort of wizard magical person, to just do away with them, because the whole thing is that if any of these people are left alive, then that means they can come back for revenge. So it's just getting rid of any threats. again, you'll have to remind me of the houses because this is where I was getting a little bit confused. So the faceless one is somebody who belongs to one of the houses.
The original faceless one is part of House Hunet, which I can't remember what level they are.
This particular character is a wizard and has, for reasons that aren't too explained, but obviously it doesn't matter, his face is already burnt off, so he's faceless one. And so there's a big sort of battle between Devere, sort of last remaining heir.
Alton Devere, yeah.
Bloody Alton Devere. And so there's a big face-off, and then the faceless one is then cut down by his younger brother.
Yeah.
So there's a fratricide going on everywhere, essentially. Yeah. And then they come to an agreement saying, like, look, I will let you live, but we need to make sure that this lie is true. If you want to take the place of my brother or this faceless one, we're going to have to burn off your face. And I was like, holy shit. The chapter kind of ends going, here's the acid. And he goes, well, I don't think there's anything else left to do. And then just starts pouring it on his face. And I'm just like, whoa. Because again, that's something goes, well, why is he just going to hide? He goes, no, it makes sense that he would hide at the academy in plain sight. So there's no chance of anyone thinking about it.
Because the whole point, as you said earlier, is that if you want to take over another house, you must destroy everyone in that house, because then they have a chance to reclaim their position back. So portents for the future, basically, with the fact that there is Alton Devere still survives.
I love that.
Right at the beginning, you've just got so much of the storyline and the world of the drow sort of explained in this first chapter with both plot A and plot B, which is great.
My issue is that I feel they cut it off way too soon. I understand, because the whole point, the other drow people we meet. So you were talking about before off podcast, the first person we meet at the academy, Keflin?
Kelsners. Kennethin.
So people who seem to be like, oh, these are characters, but then they give in to like stereotypical, she says in quotation marks, drow behavior, like, oh, impulse to go, I hate this, and then kill. I just feel like Alton's disguise is so good, but then obviously he burns and goes, oh, this Drizzt person, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I guess it's because it's against the family name, not necessarily Drizzt. But in my head, I was like, oh, but you could really get in with Drizzt and get very close to him and not just treat each other like shit. I don't know. I guess because there's all this societal pressure and stuff like that. I just thought it would be cool to see this continue on past this book, because there's a big fight at the end where Alton sees his chance to get Drizzt and then obviously gets killed in the process, because Drizzt is obviously an amazing fighter, which is getting described throughout the book, this idea that he is so dexterous. There's a great scene in which Zacnafane and Matron Malice are like fighting for what his path is going to be, because obviously they've lost their house wizard, the firstborn has been killed, so they said, well, you have to replace him, and Zacnafane goes, no, he's very good. Look, he can catch all these coins in his hands. And she goes, oh, fine, you can train him. And he's like, yes, I can make sure he's not succumbed to that corruption. So there's little things like that. I'm like, oh, that's really good, but I want more of it. Because I was like, what will happen if Devere continues living on? It could be a recurring enemy. The other thing I wanted to sort of talk about in general was like the amount of monsters that I recognized in these sort of encounters. So we had like hooked horrors. There was like a patrol where Drizzt again is just demonstrating his skill. And hook horrors are horrible creatures. They're like these big bird creatures that just have hooks for hands. And you're like, that's horrible. Anything in the Underdark is bad. There's something like I think it was like a cave dweller, which looks like some sort of horrible white crab thing that I was looking up. But then you have something like the Handmaiden of Lolth that Matron Malice talks to. I'm going to say their name wrong, but it's like a Yochlin, which is it just looks like yellow ooze with an eye. And I'm like, they're demons. I get that. But in my head, because I weirdly don't see Lolth as a demon, even though she is a demon deity. She's a demon god. That's her whole sort of backstory. But in my head, I was like, wow, this is not nice. Why are people praying? This is
because she wasn't originally a demon, was she?
No.
She was just an elven god that sort of descended to the abyss. So
yeah, she got cast out because she wanted too much power.
Yeah,
and she was like unionizing all the elven, because the elves could change their form and their their appearance and gender at will. And she was like, there's more power if you stay as one, and was convincing everyone to do that. And then as a result, got cast out.
That was it. Yeah.
And then so we've got the monsters. We've got like this earth elemental fight as well. I know we'll talk about the deep gnomes as well.
Yeah.
I do want to quickly go back to the end of the academy, whereby like they get to their final year.
This is probably one of the most sort of like subject matters. You're just a little bit like, okay.
It's a bit grim. So essentially there's a ceremony just before they graduate, these fighters or whatever they've trained as. I think this was a melee academy. And I will just paraphrase what it says in the Forgotten Realms wiki. There is like mind manipulating smoke or drugs, and then they kind of get seduced by the female clerics of Lolth. And obviously, Drizzt is like, no, thank you. And then almost gets seduced by his sister as well. I know what it's doing. It's supposed to be like, spiders and that sort of thing. And I was just like, oh, grim.
Yeah, it didn't need the sister. It didn't need.
I didn't think it needed a sister. Absolutely,
because she could have just witnessed him, rejecting the other person. Because then it does lead on to. Because I think the reason was to make it more obvious against your nature to sort of help you to create this world maybe a bit more. But I
think what you're going to say is that it's going to lead to what the punishment is of the Driders, which again is a great reveal. I completely agree. I was like, let's keep the sister stuff out of it. And it's just one paragraph. It's so small. I think he's already hammered her, but if she'd seen it, it's like, how dare you go against this, and then let me show you what we do to people. But then this is why I think Matron Malice is such an interesting character. She's the one that stops this punishment on Drizzt about the Drider. She's like, he's more used to us. He's one of the best fighters we've got.
He's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Like, she's definitely doing she's
aware that he could turn, and she goes, we can break that. Like, she's very confident that she can. She said, there's no point in wasting this asset, which it just feels like it's just so one above.
Because he is an amazing fighter, which we haven't said, but like, he trained really well by Zaknafein. Zaknafein was one of the best fighters there ever was. And Drizzt, again, absolutely nails it at the academy after being like, apart from whenever he's betrayed.
Well, then he learns from that as well, that idea that he has to work alone. He can't rely on people, which again, I know will become a bigger theme in the later couple of books. Again, you have this almost like a labyrinth-style, like maze-like fighting arena, which again feels very Hunger Games. Like, you come across people, and there's people with wizards that are going to stop you, and so he has to sneak around. And he said, like, the second time he does it in his yearly training sort of stuff, he just takes hours because he just is so careful about tracking stuff.
He is a ranger.
He's actually the best ranger, it turns out. So,
and we'll come to it in later books when he does emerge into the Overland. It kind of interestingly puts, like, at the moment, because you always think, well, he's a fighter, right? That's clearly what he is.
Oh, yeah, it comes across as fighter, absolutely.
His story is the journey of clearly how they like, let's add some spells to it. Whereas because he adds some druid to it, because he then goes and meets a character who is like this very druidic ranger character, and then gets trained from him out in the wilds and gains the sort of druidy part of nature. So he gets to level 3 or 2, whatever it is.
It specializes.
Specializes and gets his spellcasting ability. Well, he has spellcasting ability innate, which he gets from his species feature, but he gets the spellcasting feature at level 2 when he actually finally escapes from
That's so funny.
The graduation is interesting. You said the Driders. The Driders is worth, like,
horrible.
It's a fate that can befall any drow, that they can be turned into a Drider, which is, you are a sort of centaur with a Lolth looks, a human body affixed to a spider.
Horrible.
Which is so Dark Souls, and there is them in Dark Souls as well, isn't there? There is a Lolth-like character in Dark Souls, and they will come up again, Driders, that's for sure.
Yeah, I feel like from this book, what I got from it, dated in places, but I did get a good sense of what drow society would be like if you lived on the inside. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable playing. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable playing drow without having read a couple of these novels first. If you see me, which I know sounds really silly, but again, that goes back to that whole thing. It's like, do your research, be sensitive about certain things. And I think sometimes people go, oh yeah, drow are this cool, because they've got all this tragic backstory, and I'm like, this is pretty dark. Are we sure we want to bring this to our table? But now that I've read this book, I'm like, okay, I can see it in a very plain way, and I can see the bits that I personally would be like, that's not for me. But then I feel a bit more confident in that, and obviously reading a bit more about the lore and stuff like that from this particular fictional angle, because it felt very accessible and readable to me. And it's just something I have not really experienced before. Like I said, I tried it with the Dragonlance stuff, and I bounced off it a little bit, and I wonder if that's because it's Kryn and all that sort of thing. But here I was like, oh, okay. So I can see ways that I might want to do it. Again, I feel I want to read more. If anything, the conclusion I've got to this is that I want to find out what happens next. Now that he's left and it's gone into exile, like, what happens now? He's got this amazing panther, Guinevere, who I think you were saying it after recording as well, this idea that this creature is summoned with a statuette from the not Alton.
Original Faces one.
No, it's the brother of the original
Hunet.
Faces.
Massage Hunet.
Massage, yeah. So he has this, and this idea that the reason why Guinevere becomes Drizzt's ally is because they go out on patrols together. All these people, all these names, they all come out on patrol together, and they bring out Guinevere to come and lead point, and they work so well together.
Yeah.
But Guinevere is under the control of that other character.
Yeah.
And there comes to a point where Drizzt is this. So yeah, there's a bit where right at the end they realize that there's going to be an attack on House Do'Urden, and they're like, right, batten down the hatches. This is very important. Everyone stays in. And for Drizzt, for whatever reason, goes, oh, my head is so busy with thoughts and this and the other. I'm going to go for a walk. And then obviously people go, this is a great time to try and assassinate him. And there's like is it the Earth Elemental then? Also, I can't remember. He gets attacked by something.
Cave Fisher, that's what it was, isn't it? Cave Fisher.
And Guinevere comes out to protect Drizzt. And then there's a moment where Guinevere is commanded to attack Drizzt, and Drizzt has to be like, no, Guinevere, you are your own master. You can control yourself. And Guinevere breaks free of this control. Very powerful stuff. And then obviously turns back and kills the other person as a result, because they want Drizzt dead, and Guinevere saves Drizzt twice. It's always interesting that when you think of say Disney movies and stuff, there's always an animal companion of stuff that's always a bit haha, I'm here to sell merchandise. Guinevere isn't fucking around.
Oh no. Yeah, and goes to the Beastlands to rest. That's where they rest, in the Beastlands. That's where they chill out under a tree. I just imagined it like the world in Black Panther when they go to the sort of, which is probably on the nose because it is a panther, but that idea of that sort of purpley hue to the land when T'Challa meets his father. That's kind of the world I just sort of imagined for where Guinevere's just chilling, just lying like those panthers do in that movie now. It's kind of it, sort of.
Yeah.
It's really interesting as well because that relationship and this sort of D&D mechanicness of it, of you can only summon a certain amount of time per day, comes out quite a lot. And when Drizzt is on their own out in the wilds in the later stories, the loneliness that he gets, and he's so comforted by, you can tell he's like, when can I open up the box again?
When can I get kitty cat with me?
Friend back.
I started listening to the second one, and it talks about how Drizzt hasn't spoken to anyone in 10 years, and he's so worried that he'll lose his voice, so he can't command Guinevere to come.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so sad.
Yeah, there's a big jump.
Yeah.
But, it's the end of the second book that we emerge
out into the surface world.
In surface world. Then you've got a book all in the surface world, which leads him to the 10 towns. And then there's a big jump again. That book, probably the third book in the series. The second book's really interesting, and we will find more about these deep gnomes, which was one of the other characters that he saved, even though someone stupidly then was like, dickhead Dinin cut the gnome's hand off.
Because his hand off, I was like, holy shit.
You can go, but you're going to... Because Drizzt was like, well, we need to leave one alive to warn them of how evil we are and how mean we are. We're going to screw them all up. And they were like, okay.
As a way to be like, this is his act of mercy. It's not the best.
Yeah, but it was the best he'd come up with. And then Dinin just goes, right, well, I'll chop his hands off. And you're like, you're such a dickhead.
I know. Absolute pillock. Yeah.
The second book does really take off in a really interesting way. And we learn so much more about the other denizens, as we talked about in our other Pects turns up, which is the people that live inside rock and live in the elemental plane of Earth. There's one in there which has got a really sweet story, and they're a really sweet representation of them. And you do get to know a bit more about the gnomes as well, which is something I just don't. Again, another species in D&D that I don't know a lot about until I read this book, which I thought was really interesting. Well, the Svirfneblin, which is the deep gnomes, the gnomes under the ground.
From memory, because we did do a DM's book club on gnomes from Mordekainen's tome.
Oh yeah.
From memory, there's not much about Svirfneblin. They're a bit more serious, and everything is uniform. That sort of vibe. And
one of the keys from the Golden Vault was set in a Underdark Svirfneblin realm.
Yeah, a colony of some sort.
One of them started making crazy contraptions, and you had to go in and get to them. The description of the place is really interesting. It's really, I really enjoy that element. There is just a bit in the next book where you're just a lot of okay, can we just get out of the Underdark now?
Is this a ×2 thing you're telling me on the audiobook?
I'm going to say, you might want to turn it to ×2 for some parts of it, where you're just a little bit and another thing gets in the way of him getting out. You're like, okay.
Yeah, I do find that sometimes, I think I told you with video games, sometimes you're you have, here's an epic quest, you've got to go from A to B, but along the way, there's always my wagon's broken. The wheel, and you're fine. Yes. Fine. Yeah. So Yeah, it's the Horizon Zero Dawn thematic. Is what
I
I do.
just ran across that map, to be honest.
Is there any final thoughts you have about this particular one about Homeland at all?
I don't think there's anything else to say apart from it was interesting just re-going through the story again, and so much of it's still like within there, the back of my head.
Yeah.
Just remembering how much I enjoyed it and how I thought the relationships, and as we've mentioned many times, I think that's just my biggest takeaway about it was like really great relationships. I think that's the thing that there's a little bit of with the gnomes in the second book, but I think that's the thing that actually lets it down in the second book because you get lonely a little bit.
Gosh,
like Drizzt gets lonely, you get a bit lonely, I think. And then I think the third book, there's a lot going on. It's not nice. There's not nice things that happen straight off the bat. And again, we're gonna have to be dealing with some content warnings for those. But really interesting, like reality check again for Drizzt of like the world above is not as
it's not been what you've been told. Yeah.
Well, you've escaped somewhere which is pretty bad, but nowhere's great. Do you know what I mean? Like the grass is not always greener. Like there are some bad people in this world as much as there are good people.
Yeah.
As someone who's not a person of color, it's hard to understand those relationships. But I don't know so much about Salvatore's existence within America, but like I would love to know someone's thoughts maybe more with more understanding of that, because there's definitely a lot written about that relationship, about being someone who's seen differently, particularly in this realm where they're seen as people that will have known for attacking elves out of nowhere and stuff like that as well. So obviously it's got more, there's something to it as well.
There's quite a few layers to it. Yeah, no, I agree.
There's so many layers to it, but it's just an interesting, his relationship with people is really difficult.
Yeah, understandably
and
so. And
him trying to build relationships with people who in their minds
already have those biases. Yeah.
And in the sort of world of D&D are good, like we're out here stopping people like coming in and like attacking elves, and it's like, no, I'm a nice person, and it's sort of
I don't do that, and you're like
exactly. So that whole relationship is really interesting.
Interesting
in the third book, but it's something that I can't, it's do you know what I mean?
Neither you or I can necessarily speak to, like, it's not our lived experience, but I completely agree. I think my takeaway from it is seeing how, I'm thinking back to the academy stuff and how, like, yes, there's the fighting stuff, which is what Drizzt goes into and just excels at, because he can't stand listening to the rhetoric, these lectures about like the hate, and he's just sort of sat there going, are we really learning this stuff, and how it affects people? And it just makes me think of, like, again, not to reference it too much, but like when you think of propaganda about wars and stuff like that, how there's an us versus them mentality, and it just gets fed into this big machine, and people just sit there and take it in. Certainly with the age of disinformation and false stuff on Twitter. I guess what I'm trying to put out is that there are things from this book, which was released 34 years ago, that really hit on me today, because there's stuff happening today which I can see parallels with, and obviously not necessarily intentional parallels, but I'm like, oh shit, like imagine if you were this person and seeing stuff like this, like, and I can relate to it in a sense. I'm like, God, there's rhetoric, when you hear about US politics, and you're like, there's just so much hate being spewed out, and people are taking it. It's like, yes, this is it. And then going out and acting on this information. And it's just, so I felt that was so interesting to see that in a fantasy book from the 90s. And presumably, like you were saying before, like, it's this influence of stuff. And ultimately, I am definitely keen to read more. I think the stuff that made me feel a bit ick, as the word, going in, I knew it was going to be possibly quite hard in places. I didn't find it too bad, but at the same time, I was like, okay, I don't agree with this bit, but I'm going to move past that and acknowledge that. And so I'm very keen to find out what happens. I'm actually keen to, I know we said that we'll see how far we go. I am keen to see how much we can actually read of this and see how far it goes. But again, who knows, we might tail off after, like you said, like the Icewind Dale trilogy, you said you were like, nah, it's a bit...
Well, the Icewind Dale I just found it just wasn't on the same level of writing, and it hasn't got the same, like, you can tell he's grown as a writer for this second one, where he's dealing with so much more complex issues of racial relations as well as interfamilial relations, and the idea of talking about very complicated social things, and as you said, like father-son relations and all these things, and it's so much more well-rounded a story comparative to a very basic jaunt through Faerun to go stop a dragon.
Is it more like Pulp Fiction like then? Like, like fantasy?
It's a bit more like that. It's definitely, as I said, you could tell there's hints and there's relationships and there's definitely much more, and there's some fun moments, but it's so much more generic at times, and it's as I said, the base storyline is The Hobbit, and it's hard to get over that. But there's little bits that are interesting. The Silvery Moon sections are kind of interesting. Meeting those people, that's a completely random, weird little town, which is definitely worth talking about when we come to it. I think what I got is I just got through that third book and I was like, oh, that was a bit of a slog at times. But then there's funny bits, and the halfling character's really fun, and he gets a little bit ahead of himself. And there's the mages from Luskan, which are really interesting. So there's similar mage-like into battling and stuff like that. It rounds off really interestingly. And then I just got to book 7 when it's like, okay, now we're starting a new trilogy again.
Yeah.
And the first one was good enough, but I was like, oh, I'm just done.
You need a break.
I mean? I needed a break from it. And that was it. So it's not like,
fair enough.
I think the books got better again. It was you go to Kalimshan, which is a completely new area that I've never been to in that third trilogy. And I was like, oh, this is quite interesting, but I kind of got bored.
You were like, I'm done for the moment. And then you were like, why don't we do it for DM's book? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good. So I'm totally going to make you do all of them now.
2020, I was reading them, I think. So it's been a while since I read them.
Thank you so much for joining me, Hamilton, and dealing with me going, what about this?
Not at all.
I'm very keen to read the rest of them. Like I said, I've started the second one now because I got them on Audible. I'm like, oh, I'm going to listen to one a month. So maybe we'll do like one a month or as many as we can, just so that we're not, like you said, we're not overwhelmed with like, oh, this is awful. Like when bad things happen per se.
It's all right for me. I just need to go through the synopses and then sort of remind myself of things. I'm like, I've already read this. I'm 6 ahead of you now. So I know. I've got 6 months of this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're like, for you. But Hamilton, where can we find you? Any projects you want to promote, etc.? Yeah,
you can find me doing Warhammer stuff on Fueled by Chaos on YouTube. I was showing Fiona my minis bases, multiple bases. That is being filmed at the moment. I just need to paint it, which I don't know if I'll do on stream. I might paint something else with Dan tonight because I'm going to be painting with Dan.
Yay! That's going to be so sweet. Painting streams is something we've talked about before and something that we just like to do. So maybe we'll do it at some point, schedules, etc. But it's because painting's a nice thing that you just work with your hands. You don't have to look at anything necessarily.
100%.
So
yeah. And then Demon Slayer and Omen of the Blood God are getting very close to being printable at the moment. Demon Slayer, I think, is pretty much there. I want to change 2 colors, and which is not a lot. And Omen of the Blood God, I may have bit off more than I could chew with adding one of the stretch goals, which is fine. It's just I'm just working through it. It's just classic Hamilton. It's fine. It's just I'm having a lot of fun with it, and also I wanted to upgrade a lot of the style and images of stuff. So Demon Slayer got a whole new set of backgrounds for all of the classes, which I really love doing. So, that took a bit of time. And then I've been redoing the Omen of the Blood God layouts, and I'm like, I'm really loving some stuff I've done. So I'm really excited that I'm like, I just feel like people are going to get it. They can see they're going to get it. I said April. I feel I should still be on target to get it out in April. I would just might be the end part of April than the beginning part of April, but I would much rather give people like a super quality product, which may be bigger than I may have initially expected, but I've just instead of having 1 page on this city, I've made it 4 pages, and that's because it's not. I've tried to keep it very lightweight. I just want to make it
you want to make it the best you can.
Spread the stuff out and put images for everything. It's more actually adding more art to it because I'm like, it just builds the world a bit more. So
I assume we might be. It either is happening.
Warhammer roleplay. We'll be doing Adventures in Mordheim. So it'll be a series. I mean, I don't know how it'll work, but we're starting off with this first off series with Fiona and Taylor playing. Fiona's gonna be playing a witch hunter.
Can't wait.
Fucking badass. Yeah.
Let me tell you, I was trying to see if there was like cheap witch hunter hats. There isn't any.
No cheap ones.
Not one for under £100. And I was like, nah. I was like, I want a nice one.
You know what? You're not too far from the East End of London. You might be able to find one in one of those fancy retro shops for a bit cheaper. It's a good costume shop in Shoreditch.
I was thinking costume shop, or there's the Satanic Market happening at some point. So there must be. Yeah. So so it's on my mind to find a decent, like high hat
Yeah.
essentially, and then put a belt around it.
I mean, you could just get yourself a dark colored Panama.
Yeah, and put it on. But yeah, so I was like, oh yeah, these look great, and I was like, oh, not for one stream. Maybe if we did.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to this. We got me as a witch hunter, and what's Tay play?
Taylor's a noble. An absolute
Classic
filthy
combination.
noble.
Can't wait. I'm very excited.
I'm really excited for it. I've been reading my Vampire Counts book because we're going to be tracking a vampire, which is not the biggest spoiler, and I'm quite excited. Got some good ideas, but I'm hoping this will be. I've tried to make this a bit more collaborative this time, opening it up, learning from my mistakes.
Oh, not at all. No.
It's gonna be good.
Excellent.
So, what about what, when, where, how, why? What are you up to?
What am I up to? Well, my name is Fiona. I am me. When it's quite bright outside.
It's lovely, isn't it?
It's now spring, I think. I feel like it's a lot nicer. Maybe I'll go for a walk for lunch. But where? I am so glad you asked. So what am I rolling is a twice monthly tabletop RPG one-shot podcast. As always, going very well. We've got a lot of interviews that have come out recently, just because I'm going through my backlog, and I do have some actual play stuff that's in the sort of back burner, but just due to timing, and of course, obviously, we sort of mentioned our podcast, but it's a bit of a big year for me, so I just got to be a bit careful and not do too much stuff.
Yes,
we will have some more actual play stuff probably coming out. I'm going to say probably May, but I'm going to try and do lots more interview stuff, and if there may be one or two repeats of previous interviews just to keep the algorithm going, so apologies for that. But it's obviously different RPG systems to play through. Also, in the meantime, though, if people are interested, I've been doing these Too Long Didn't Read tabletop RPG streams where basically, instead of actually editing my content, I just create more content and don't edit it by doing an accountability stream where I read through an RPG for about an hour to 2 hours and see what I like about it, see what I find could improve about it, anything in accessibility. So I just roll randomly on a table and I pick whatever comes up as something to look at. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about this game. It turns out to be great. I'm like, oh, I've heard about this game, and it turns out to be rubbish. So you never know what you're going to get.
You can still see all of those on your YouTube channel so you can, if you want to go find out about any of the games that you're like, oh, I don't know about this, and you want to hear someone who knows a lot about games, then you can listen to Fiona do it on the YouTubes, which is the What Am I Rolling YouTube.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we do it on Twitch and What Am I Rolling YouTube. There's no rhyme or reason to when they happen. I try and do them sometimes straight after work, but again, times and shifting, changing. So
it's good for commuting.
It is. Yes, it is good for commuting. My voice going, oh, I don't like this, coming out from your speakers.
Oh, other thing, I'm going to be launching another Kickstarter, which is a charitable one. Yes, I'm adding more to my life. But at the time when I was doing my first Kickstarter, my daughter's school hall is doing a big charity fund to raise money for the school hall. And that got me thinking of like, what could I do with my daughter that would be fun? Because it was like, they gave everyone £5 from the school to make £50 was the plan. That's what it was.
Oh,
so it was like getting your kids to start their entrepreneurial spirit. And so I thought, well, we could do something together. And because I was doing the Kickstarter, I thought, well, maybe she could draw some monsters and I could add some stat blocks to it. And maybe we could sell it online. And then I thought, well, there are children around the world that actually are need so much more than my daughter's school, even though that is still a worthy cause for all the other children at that state school, which does a lot of work in the community generally. But we thought that what we would do is also do a Kickstarter and give money to UNICEF, which is doing work in both Gaza and Ukraine. And so the idea is it will be a Kickstarter. You will get a document called The Party, where there will be a bunch of lovable little monsters that Iona has drawn, and I've sort of edited and added little affectations to make them just a little bit more morky-borky and give them a bit more, like, fix some little issues here. Just a little bit of editing, nothing major. Most of it is
my beautiful child's creativity, but let me just
98% of it is her. To clarify, warning, this is still a game of Morkborg. It's not for children.
It's not family friendly.
It's not family friendly, but the tone of it is definitely written in a very much like it's a children's story. So it's kind of like,
that's adorable.
So you've got like Leaky is one of them, who is snotty and just gets snot everywhere, but it's infectious and he will also eat you. You've also got Saw, who loves parties, loves wearing hats and scarves and lovely things, including things from other people. So they sometimes they take other things, sometimes they wear things from other people, which you can infer what you want from that, but Saw will take parts of your body off you. So it's like written in a sort of
childlike way.
But yeah, so and this little adventure where you go to a party where you're the guest of honor. You don't know why, but every party needs great party food. It's kind of fun, and I've really enjoyed writing it. So I hope people buy it. And as I said, 80% of the money will be going to UNICEF and 20% towards the school hall fund. Nothing going to any of us. It's just for fun. And it's just to give money to a lot of causes out there that need it.
When is the plan for that to go live, Hamilton?
It will be live in middle of March. It depends on and it will be a 2-week one. I'm just going to do a quick 2-week Kickstarter.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure that it's in the show notes, or at least a link to a page where you can be notified.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely, because that's such a worthy cause. And how wholesome to do stuff with your children like this. Because sometimes it's like, oh, we've done the arts and crafts together. You're like, I've made a whole dungeon inspired by my child's drawings.
Yeah,
you're like,
some of these drawings, 2 of them she made specifically. I said, let's draw some monsters, but a lot of them I've just gone in the back catalogue of photos I've got of stuff she's drawn and gone, that was fucking terrifying, and that's going in. You know what I mean? So no additional child labour has been done for this. It's all stuff that she was doing.
All she wanted to do. Yeah.
She likes drawing monsters. It's her thing. Yeah. So there you go.
Well, on that very wholesome note, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the flip side.